The coming four blood moons points to a world-shaking event that will happen between April 2014 and October 2015. I believe that the heavens are God's billboard, that He has been sending signals to planet Earth, and we just haven't been picking them up. This is God's signal to this terminal generation that something is big and it's going to happen soon. And that something is going to change world history forever.
The blood moon. A lunar eclipse. To the Greek conqueror Alexander the Great, it was an omen of blessing after his victory over the Persians. To the Greek leader Nicias of the city of Athens, it was a signal of his defeat at the hands of the Spartans. To Charlemagne, the emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, a series of lunar and solar eclipses were a sign of his impending death. Events like these led the great bard William Shakespeare to observe,
"These late eclipses in the sun and moon portend no good to us."
Throughout history, eclipses of the sun and the moon have been taken as signs of something ominous. Today, there are some who say that God Himself has ordained an impending series of eclipses to warn us of something significant to come. 4 red moons, 1 black sun. According to prophecy writers like John Hagee, the combination of 4 red moons, 1 black sun has happened before, and each time it can be linked to significant events in the history of the people of Israel. So also, he says, we should soon expect something else significant to happen in 2014 or 2015. Could this possibly be true? Could the next series of 4 red moons, 1 black sun, be a sign that the end of all things is near?
There are Christians who have been predicting the end of the world for hundreds of years. You can find books written in the 1800s saying that the world is about to end. You can find books written in the 1900s saying that the world is about to end. You can find all sorts of different figures identified as the Antichrist. Adolf Hitler, Ronald Reagan, Mikhail Gorbachev, Pope John Paul II. It seems that Christians don't ever learn from these mistakes, and that's why John Hagee is able to get away with writing all these books.
Is the past occurrence of 4 red moons, 1 black sun, really tied to significant events in Jewish history? And do they signify for Jews a trail of tears, followed by a time of triumph? According to John Hagee and other prophecy authors, 3 prior instances can be identified. First, the red moons and black sun of the years 1493 and 94. These years were marked by the tragic expulsion of Jews from the Kingdom of Spain, followed by the triumph of the discovery of America, where Jews might later find a refuge. Second, the red moons and the black sun of the years 1949 and 1950. These were marked by the founding of the modern Jewish state of Israel, and that nation's subsequent victory in a war for its very survival. Finally, the red moons and black sun of 1967 and 1968. These, we are told, aligned with the Six-Day War, when the State of Israel triumphed over its many enemies in a difficult battle of survival. Does this mean that red moons and black sun of 2014 and 15 will also see some significant event in Jewish history? Hagee is correct to say that a correspondence of blood moons with Jewish holidays is a rarity, but it is not as rare as he would have us believe. Lunar eclipses can only take place at the time of a full moon. Jewish holy days, meanwhile, are on a lunar calendar, which means they can only begin at the time of a full moon. Astronomer Danny Faulkner tells us that of the 230 lunar eclipses that took place in the 20th century, 1/6 took place on Jewish festival dates. The coincidence of a blood moon and a Jewish feast day is no miracle. But isn't it more unusual to have 4 blood moons so close together on Jewish holidays combined with a solar eclipse? Yes, it is, but it is not as unusual as Hagee would have us believe.
Hagee completely ignores all the tetrads that occurred before 1492 AD. And that is a sign, but it's a sign that the only way he can make his case is by limiting the amount of information he gives to his audience. Now let's look at the dates of these prior tetrads that Hagee ignores. 162 to 163 AD, 795 to 796 AD, 842 to 843 AD, and 860 to 861 AD. Now if we look at those 4 periods in history, we find that the Jews of that era were living in relative peace. There were no events of significance associated with them of the type that Hagee was looking for.
How significant are the events associated with these later red moons and black suns? We begin with the events tied to the red moons and the black sun of the years 1493 and 94. In what way can these eclipses be connected to the events concerning the Jewish people? Are they connected, as Hagee says, to the expulsion of Jews from Spain and the subsequent founding of America as a refuge for and ally of the Jews? Although the expulsion from Spain was undoubtedly a significant historical event, it only affected a portion of Jews alive at the time. Jews of the age lived all over Europe, not in Spain alone. In addition, the key event at this time, the Royal Edict, which expelled the Jews from Spain, was issued on March 31st, 1492, over a year before the first of the 4 blood moons. In his teachings, Hagee extends the connection between the blood moons and the Jewish people by way of the voyage of Christopher Columbus. According to Hagee, Columbus himself was of Jewish descent, and his finding of America gave Jews both a place of refuge and a future ally. But while the Jewishness of Columbus is a theory that is held by some respected historians, the notion that Columbus discovered America in the sense of the United States is untrue. None of Columbus's 4 voyages had him setting foot on the land now called the United States of America. It was not until 1565 and the founding of St. Augustine, Florida, that any European is known for certain to have set foot in what is now called the United States. The earliest Jew to set foot in America, Elias Lagarde, did not arrive until 1621, when English settlers arrived in Virginia. In fact, Columbus cannot even lay claim to being the first European to visit any part of the American continents. That honor belongs to Leif Erikson, a Viking explorer, who arrived somewhere along the North Atlantic coast 300 years before the time of Columbus and the four blood moons of 1493 and 4. A final consideration is that the expulsion of Jews from Spain in the 1490s is not unique. In 1182 AD, Jews were expelled from France by King Philip Augustus. In 1622 AD, Jews were expelled from Switzerland by the Swiss Parliament. Altogether, Jews were expelled no less than a dozen times from European nations between the years 1100 and 1500 AD. It is hard to explain why the expulsion from Spain would be regarded as any more meaningful, or why, if Hagee was right, the heavens would have been silent concerning these other expulsions. We now consider events tied to the red moons and the black sun of the years 1949 and 50. The difficulties this time are obvious. Hagee connects the events of these eclipses to the founding of Israel, which occurred in 1948. But he does not name any significant event that occurred during the span of the time associated with the eclipses. In fact, Israel's war for independence ended on March 10, 1949, 1 month before the first red moon. Hagee has been telling us that God himself ordained these eclipses as signals. But surely, if this were God's intention, he would have been able to achieve a match and not miss the events in question by even the slimmest margin.
Now, if these eclipses are really a sign as Hagee claims, how is it that God has missed these events by a year or more with these eclipses? Close may count in horseshoes, but there's nothing about it counting in biblical prophecy.
Now consider the final set of events Hagee ties to the red moons and the black sun in the years 1967 and 8. These eclipses Hagee connects to the Great Six-Day War, in which the State of Israel met 3 of its Arab opponents, Egypt, Syria, and Jordan, all in battle. True to its name, the war was fought between June 5th and the 10th, 1967, a stunning victory for Israel against all seeming odds. It is also arguably a success against all odds for Hagee, as this key event, unlike the others we have seen, does occur within the time frame of the eclipses. But Hagee's success is undermined by the fact that many significant events in Jewish history, including many that affected larger number of Jewish people, were not accompanied by a series of 4 red moons and 1 black sun. If any event could be regarded as significant in Jewish history, it would be the Holocaust. 6 million Jews were brutally and wantonly murdered by the infamous Nazi regime. Yet not 1 year of that tragic period between 1933 and 1945 was marked by a series of 4 red moons and 1 black sun. Another significant event was the occurrence of pogroms, or violent attacks on Jews in Russia during the 19th century. These attacks sparked worldwide outrage, but by Hagee's reckoning, the heavens were strangely silent about them. Yet other events of great significance to the Jewish people went unmarked by this phenomena. According to the Jewish historian Josephus, the destruction of the Jewish temple in 70 AD was marked by certain heavenly signs, but not red moons and a black sun. The final destruction of Jewish resistance by the Emperor Hadrian in AD 135, in response to the Bar Kokhba rebellion, also passed by the heavens unobserved.
Now, if what Hagee is saying here is correct, that means that the expulsion of the Jews from Spain was of more importance in God's eyes and more deserving of a sign than the Holocaust, the Russian pogroms of the 19th century, or even the destruction of the temple in 70 AD. I don't think that reflects well on what Hagee supposes to be God's priorities.
A final point to consider is that Hagee argues that these red moons and black suns are intended to be signs to Israel and to the world at large. But an examination of records supplied by NASA indicates that very few people actually witness any of these eclipses, and that the few who would do so are often not those for whom the message would be of any significance. The full solar eclipse of 1493, referred to by Hagee, was probably seen by no one at all, having traversed over remote and freezing regions of the Antarctic south of Australia, thousands of miles from Spain. The full solar eclipse of 1950 was also likely seen by virtually no one, traversing another frozen path, this time over the Arctic Ocean and Siberia, thousands of miles from Israel. The full solar eclipse to which Hagee refers in 1967 was also in view of only a frozen audience far into the Antarctic Sea, thousands of miles from Israel, and indeed from anyone. It gets no better for the future black sun of March 2015. This solar eclipse's path takes it over a remote part of the North Atlantic and Arctic Oceans, with only the Faroe Islands and the island of Svalbard along the way. Fewer than 50,000 people inhabit these remote islands, which are difficult to reach and are frequently subject to cloud over, especially in March when the Arctic winter is still affecting the region. Surely if Hagee were right about these being a sign from God and a message to the world, they would be visible to far more people. Similar problems affect the lunar eclipses cited by Hagee. Although these eclipses may be seen over a much broader area, they did not consistently match the areas Hagee points to as most affected by current historical events. Neither Spain nor Israel bore witness to all 4 total lunar eclipses in their times, and saw as few as one of them as a full-fledged blood moon.
Why doesn't John Hagee explain to his readers where these solar and lunar eclipses can be seen? He spends pages upon pages talking about his theories of the end times, but not in one sentence does he explain the paths of these solar and lunar eclipses. It's not hard to see why he won't do that. It's because it's hard to explain why a total solar eclipse visible only in a small part of Siberia should have any meaning to people all over the world.
There is no doubt that John Hagee is justified in claiming that, in theory, God is able to use the sun, the moon, and the stars to send messages to mankind. According to many scholars, the Star of Bethlehem, which signified to the Magi that a Savior had been born in the land of Israel, would have qualified as such a message, working within an understanding of that time that stellar objects signaled the birth or death of a king. But is Hagee then justified in saying that Joel 2:31 and its parallels refer to an event that is such a message, and that the combination of 4 red moons, 1 black sun, can be understood as a form of divine prophecy? Initially, a problem is that none of these passages specifically relates the occurrence of multiple eclipses. If they are to be interpreted literally, only 1 black sun and 1 red moon are the sign to be provided, not 1 black sun and 4 red moons. Additionally, these eclipses are said to indicate a coming judgment of God, not significant events in Jewish history, as Hagee puts it. It is also an open question as to whether these passages are meant to describe literal stellar events. In the biblical world, stellar symbols often represented nations, rulers, and peoples, just like the stars of the American flag represent states, or the rising sun represents the nation of Japan. The message of Joel and other passages would then concern political upheavals and judgment upon nations, not predictions of literal astronomical events. Hagee is also much too eager to understand stellar events as divine billboards. He refers to the February 2013 meteor, which soared over Russia, causing a shockwave that resulted in hundreds of injuries and a great deal of property damage. But why would this have been taken as a sign from heaven, or a supernatural FedEx message, as he claims? Hagee supposes that it was a message to Russia as a formerly atheistic nation that God is unique and can do as he pleases. But what about this event specifically related such a message? Given the level of property damage done to the area, especially the broken glass, it is just as well to say that God's message to Russia was to create stronger windows. A final consideration is a similar event that occurred over the Tunguska region of Russia in 1908. An unknown object, which may have been an asteroid or a comet, was the biggest collision we've had from a stellar object since humans have been recording history. It hit in a remote swampy area of Russia, and the impact it made was enormous compared to the event of 2013. But in 1908, Russia was not yet an atheistic nation, and Christianity under the Russian Orthodox Church was still prominent. By Hagee's logic, God was sending an even bigger and nastier FedEx message to Russia before it was atheist. There was nothing about the meteor that related any message of any content. Any message must be read into the event, and the only limits to that reading are the imagination. Four Blood Moons is a recent attempt by John Hagee to tie current event to which he argues will be the imminent occurrence of end-of-times events such as the rapture and the tribulation period. But this is not the first time he has made such an attempt. In fact, Hagee has an extensive record of error in tying current events to what he supposes will be imminent end-times events. And each time he has done so, he has not only failed, but also failed to admit failures.
There's no question about this. John Hagee has an extended record of failure when it comes to making predictions about end times events. And the sad part about this is he either never learns from his mistakes or else he never admits them. No matter how we look at this, how can we possibly trust Hagee as an authority on these matters?
In 1996, Hagee authored The Beginning of the End. In that book, Hagee claimed that the assassination of Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin on November 4, 1995, launched Bible prophecy onto the fast track, because he said Rabin's blood will now become the bonding force that will drive the nation of Israel and other leaders of the Middle East to new heights of unity, to secure a legacy of peace in Rabin's memory. In the same book, Hagee also indicated that the spread of the Ebola virus was a signal of the imminent end, and that oil would be a main motive for a Russian invasion of Israel, as they would attack Israel to appease Islamic nations who would pay Russia in oil in return for the favor. As we all know by now, none of what Hagee predicted in 1996 has come to pass. Rabin's tragic death did not lead to the legacy of peace. The Ebola virus does not remain a real threat. But major outbreaks have killed less than 1,000 people in Africa since 1996. And Russia, of course, has yet to attack Israel, to get oil, or for any other reason. In his 1999 book, From Daniel to Doomsday, Hagee found yet another current event upon which to center his warnings, the infamous Y2K bug, which many were concerned would lead to worldwide malfunctions in computer systems and severe economic hardship. Hagee, too, expected tragic consequences from Y2K and offered many dire warnings of imminent economic chaos and deaths because of the Y2K bug. But what happened to the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin as a sign that biblical prophecy was on the fast track to be fulfilled? In From Daniel to Doomsday, it is no longer seen as a sign of anything. Instead, Hagee quietly put away his mistake as though nothing had gone wrong. Hagee also offered many other scenarios in this book, including one in which Iraqi dictator Saddam Hussein would join forces with Russia to invade Israel. But again, as we all know, none of this came to pass. A year later, Hagee issued yet another book, The Battle for Jerusalem. Did Hagee use this book to confess his errors concerning the Y2K bug? He didn't. In fact, the Battle of Jerusalem contains exactly the same end times material as From Daniel to Doomsday, with entire pages being exact copies of what was in the earlier book, only without claiming that the Y2K bug would be the catalyst. In 2008, Hagee issued yet another book, Financial Armageddon. This time, Hagee predicted that the economic crash of the prior year was a sign of the end times upon us. In light of this crisis, it was argued that people will look for global leaders to solve financial problems and that no doubt this would be the Antichrist. It has not been that long since then, and many believe we are still experiencing the results of that economic crash. But as yet, 6 years later, we still see no serious effort to unify the world under one leader as a way to solve financial problems.
In the book of James, chapter 3, verse 1, we're told that teachers will be judged more strictly. If I were John Hagee, I would be pretty concerned about that verse.
At least 3 times, Hagee has chosen a different event as a signal of the imminent end of the age. 3 times, Hagee has forecasted wrongly. And 3 times, he has moved on to something else, while also not admitting his prior mistakes. Does this mean he will also be wrong about the significance of the blood moons?
Historically, there's been a lot of turmoil in the Middle East recently. And I'd say there's a 50 to 60% chance that Hagee is right that some sort of significant event is going to happen during the tetrad that's coming up. But that won't be because he made a good prediction. It will be because he set the bar of evidence so low that all he has to do is step on it, not jump over it. If something does happen during that period, he'll probably write a book about it and claim success. If nothing significant happens during that period, he'll just do what he did before and write another book later predicting that something else is a sign to the end. Either way, he wins.
Christians should spend far less time gazing at the prophetic skies and more time doing what Jesus commanded us to do. Evangelize, feed the poor, heal the sick. Far too many of us turn to prophecy as a way to feed our escapism and indeed avoid the duties Christ has laid on us. The church will better fulfill its purpose if it recovers from blood moon lunacy.